Just to start real quick, just going to run through this, and you have the outline to keep, but I'm just going to run through some thoughts here. We actually go to the beginning of why did God make us? He made us for a partnership with himself. God made creation. He made creation, though, as a way that when he made us, he would use creation to communicate with us physically. We are psychophysical beings. And because of that, God uses physical means to communicate himself to us. Now, Adam and Eve, contrary to some of the books we saw as kids in Sunday school, early understandings were Adam and Eve were not created perfect. They were created innocent, but they weren't perfect. As the rabbis in Jesus' time would have said, if they were perfect, they wouldn't have blown it. True. So, this idea that God created humanity, St. Basil actually says that he envisioned God created Adam as a baby, was to grow us up in the process. And in that partnership to cultivate creation, to utilize creation as a means of communion between God and each other, we would grow into that intimacy and become the full potential of what it means to be human through God. And well, of course, we blew that. And what we have happened is because creation becomes a means for self-sustenance, self-existence, self-control. And I mean control in the wrong sense, self-control in the wrong sense. And not a means of sharing life and letting God share life back with us. Humanity is wounded, it's traumatized. And very much like a child that is abused or starts doing drugs or alcohol, like at a certain age, they remain that age. What we have is a humanity that is stunted. It is spiritually, not just emotionally, but spiritual plays into emotion. We're emotionally paralyzed. And that's why for all the technological advances we can make as human beings, blah, 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 we are still like, at best, early adolescents as a world. Well, the story of the whole scriptures is God goes through time looking for a humanity who will partner back with him to rescue humanity and creation, which is part of the story of Noah and the ark. It's not just Noah and his family, it's all creation is part of this redemption, this salvation that God has in mind. And he starts with Noah, then we get to Abraham, and he's going to pick a specific family now because God made us to be community. We're communal beings. For those of us who are Orthodox, we understand the Trinity. Not we understand the Trinity, but we know the Trinity that's been revealed. God would not be the God he is without his Son and the Spirit. We're made in God's image and likeness. We're communal beings. We start as community. We know who we are in community. Without community, we wouldn't know who we are as persons at all. So he's looking for a people and a community to partner with to bring about the restoration of humanity and through humanity to bring about the rescue of creation itself. And so that's where you get Abraham moving into Israel. And Israel would be the community partnering with God and would keep itself as like a bridal, like a marital partnership with God. Which made sense back then to them as they were agrarian people. That when you got married back then, it wasn't just that they were cute or nice or this or that. The other thing, you married somebody that you could have a life partnership to till the fields, to work the soil, to do all those things together, to have a life partner. And that's what, of course, physical intimacy and plays in and all that kind of stuff, because it's part of the partnership with God. The potential to create life is part of the partnership with God. And I won't go into the whole thing of God's complementarity that he does in Scripture that's so obvious. You know, heaven and earth, body, soul, male, female. All these things are supposed to be complementary to each other that reflect more fully the mystery than if you only had one of those things in and of itself. But that's a whole other issue. So we get to Moses, and first we have Abraham, and then it becomes whoever the descendants are of Abraham, or whoever married into Abraham's family through descendants, that's Israel. But then with Moses, you suddenly see that opens up to not just the physical or biological family of Abraham, because Egyptians go along in the Exodus and they pick up other peoples as they're going through the desert and so on and so forth. So that the idea now becomes it's not about the biological, ethnic, whatever descendancy of those belonging to Abraham. It's all these people who, with the coming of the Torah, will live according to the laws of God. That these are the boundaries of this relationship and being in this partnership with God. But the problem is, the people that are supposed to be part of the solution become part of the problem. But the amazing part of God is his persistence to chase us and chase us and chase us. And ultimately, this will telescope into Jesus, who will be the human being who will partner with God and who will embody everything that God is and embody what Israel is to be. Now, with this, what's happened, the traumatizing, that has affected us on all levels. What we have in the fall of humanity, we've been fractured, body, soul, that's why death exists. But even mind from heart, all these things have been broken. Sickness is a result of that fracturing. Sickness is an icon of that fracturing. And I think it's important to understand because illness often can be a somatization, not just of getting older, but also maybe of other issues in our lives. And let me say this, there's 3 levels of looking at this. Is it sometimes because of a personal action that I am directly responsible for? Yeah, it can be. That's one level. Like when Jesus heals a paralytic and says, sin no more lest something worse happen to you. The second level, though, is like secondhand smoke, where a family smokes and the kids start getting respiratory issues. It's not the kid's fault. It's not. They were not responsible for that. It was because of the intimate, closer relationships that had an effect. And then there's the third level where it's just we live in a spiritually polluted world. We live in a spiritually polluted world where the innocent get hit. And so the question that unless it's very obvious sometimes what may need to be repented of, a lot of times it's just because we're in that spiritually broken, polluted environment. Like Jesus talking in John 9, they go to the blind man, and Peter goes, who sinned, this man or his mother? And Jesus' response is, it doesn't matter. What you have to focus on is that the glory of God be revealed. Because sometimes we can over to looking at ourselves. So, Jesus himself is the embodiment, the telescope through the story of Israel into Jesus. That's why knowing the story of Israel as part of what God has planned to do, that through Jesus he would then have a community who would be the authentic Israel, the authentic bride, the authentic partner in this act of restoration, rebirth, and so forth. And so, of course, Jesus comes and embraces every level of our existence, the good, the bad, the corrupt, the sick, the healthy, everything, including our own death, our own mortality, and he crushes it. He breaks the back of death, because that's the problem. Death has been allowed because we interrupted the communion with God. And now he comes, and I think this is really important when people ask, why were there blood sacrifices in the Old Testament? Why did God need animals killed? And in some religions, of course, they would have human sacrifices. And the idea that life and blood are interconnected, let me just say something. In biblical thought, a symbol is what it symbolizes. Okay? There's no such thing as an empty symbol, as I hear sometimes people say in certain circles, even some Christian circles. A symbol is what it symbolizes. Fire symbolizes heat, for example. Fire is hot. No Israelite would have said the Ark of the Covenant is just some box. God uses creation to directly communicate his presence. Not that he becomes the creation literally like pantheism, but he is definitely present, energizing himself through that creation to communicate directly himself. And so blood symbolizes life. Because, and we know this, without blood you're dead. You lose, what is it, even like 4 or 5 pints? That wouldn't be good, let alone all 9 pints that we have in it. And they understood that the traumatizing, the wounding of humanity was such that we lost life out of ourselves. We were bleeding, we were hemorrhaging. And so the animal's blood was like an image of the fact that that blood would be replaced. It would be given back to us. By offering it to God, it would be given back to us. And what comes, as the letter to the Hebrews says, the ultimate reality that no longer through the blood of bulls and goats and so forth, God himself, through his Son, would organically fuse himself to all of us. And literally cause, before the concept ever was known in modern times, a life transfusion of his very self in the community, in and as community. And the difference between a Christian and a non-Christian is not whether God is attached to only Christians versus he's not attached to all the non-Christians. The difference is that the Christian is the one that is aware and cooperating with that reality. And lives that's the reality. And God has now bonded, welded himself to us even physically through Jesus, that even when we put toxins back into our system, he doesn't unplug. He does not unplug himself. He does not unplug himself. And this reality is more fully seen in the community. Let me share this real quick. We live in a modern world in Christianity where community is like an add-on. Right? How many of us grew up that, you don't really need to go to church, even as Orthodox? You know. It'd be good, but, if you don't. Well, they saw community as a necessity. It was like there was no reality apart from the community. And the gospel writers are very clear about what this means. When Jesus resurrects in the Gospel of John, for example, okay, the first person to see him is pop quiz. Who's the first person to see Jesus in John's Gospel? One woman particularly, Mary Magdalene. And after she recognizes him, she jumps toward him and he says, "Don't hold on to me." Now, there's a lot of meanings to that this isn't the way it used to be. I'm not limited by a three-dimensional existence anymore, etc. But I always seem to be fascinated why, when we get to the upper room story, touch me. And John's making the point that it is in community that the fullest expression of Jesus is known. Thomas, who's not there, does not get a special appearance. He has to be part of the community of the apostles. Luke does the same thing. All right? The two walking on the road to Emmaus, they go, they experience it, they realize this stranger talking to them about the scriptures and so forth. They recline at the table, he takes the bread, blesses and breaks it, and suddenly, bang, he's recognized to them in the breaking of the bread. Where do they run? Immediately to the community of the apostles. And then Jesus pops up there again. So community, the gathering to be the body of Jesus, is to literally uncover physically that eternal reality within time and space, that eternal kingdom invading, inaugurated, actually inaugurated, not as an event that happened 2,000 years ago, but that